Oh yes, yes, yes. I love that cut. Little southern style on that. Just love the music. I love music, and this is our music talk show. And this is a third or fourth episode. Can't remember. I guess I need to start marking those. We spent a couple of weeks talking about Tesla and leading into Def Leppard. I guess it was two episodes. This is the third, and they're not meant to be one and done. We'll probably cover a band at least 2 weeks, and some maybe more. You can always extend it as far as you want. It's not intent to stay on one, but kind of keep rolling with it. But some of them just lend that it's going to take a little more time as you talk about it. And then we'll come back to them as we have guests come on. In fact, we're going to have some with this one. I'll be reaching back out to. I wanted to lay the groundwork for the band, Def Leppard, before we get into guests coming in and talking about their concert experiences and things like that. I have seen Def Leppard many times. You may not like them, or you may love them, or you may just don't even have an opinion. That's fine. But the legendary band, that's without doubt. Even if you don't like their music, you don't like them or changes they've made. Maybe you like the older band more than the newer band, because there's been changes due to deaths and things. Uh, okay, that's fine. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan since I heard about them, and I'll talk about that as we go on. The year was 1977. The year was 1977. I've been thinking back about that year. For me, I was 12 years old. I was fully aware of a lot was going on in the world. I had definitely been a person who had paid attention to politics of the day. My dad was very much into politics. He liked some music, but my love of music did not come from my dad. It came from my mom. And I've said this before on the show. Sorry, trying to get this back up. It's going to be a pain tonight. That's just the way it goes. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. We'll get it back up there. A little backdrop. It's late night, Dave late night. So hopefully that will correct itself in a minute. There we go. There we go. Bothers me. Bothers me. My mom had a love of music from Motown to Elvis to country to pop and rock and nothing really heavy, nothing crazy or nothing like that. But she instilled in me a great love of music. We shared that, always did. My mom loved to dance. I'm not a dancer, but my mom loved to dance. Health issues would keep her from dancing a lot of her life. She had some afflictions that was really a shame. She was so full of life and moving around. She was always full of life, but she wasn't able to move as much. And I will tell you a story later on down the road, later as we get into different eras of the band, that my mom did for me, that just the kind of thing that moms do. I've mentioned on the air before. It was very sweet. It was a very hard time for me. It was around the time that Steve Clark passed. We're not there tonight. We're just talking about 1977. Well, I was 12, but I remember Star Wars came out. Went to the movies and saw that. A lot of people did. It was the premiere of Star Wars. So just trying to give you some context about what was going on in the world. It was a huge premiere. Started a whole new cult following, right? Major cult following. Maybe they're not happy today where the empire is at, or whatever you want to say that. But that was a big year. The Atari Video Computer System released. I had one. I don't think I had it in '77 though. I think that came around. I don't know, sometime in the next year or so after that. I never got anything right as it came out. The systems were too high. My family was worked hard and poor, and but it was also the year, and I'll never forget this, the year that Elvis Presley died, which was traumatic to my mom and me too. And I remember we were swimming on the lake. It was a very hot day. We come out of the water. Our dad said that, or my uncle, or one of them, they were sitting there in the shade, we were camping out. And one of them said, Elvis has died. And I said, we're thinking, no, it's got to be a joke. No, it wasn't a joke. And just devastated. This ended we went home. And my mom was really grieving. And I stayed with her. My dad was just indifferent. He just didn't see it that way. We get close to our musical, heroes a word that's thrown around, but our musical influences, things that people we like, we feel like we know them, even though they will never know us. We feel like that, and I certainly have that relationship with Def Leppard. There's a lot of things that come along. I never met them, although I did stay on their band floor once. in Atlanta, GA. We grab at stuff like that, don't we? I thought I saw Sav in the elevator at Atlanta. See-through elevator. We were on the other side. We went down to check it out. We thought it was Sav. It wasn't Sav. It was a guy that looked like him. But he died. Um, there were airport disasters. It was the era of the airport movies too because of that. And the Apple II launch, personal computer revolution. These are some of the events that went on in '77. It probably didn't register on the Richter scale. In fact, even in the town of Sheffield, nobody probably even paid any kind of attention, except maybe their parents wondering what the heck their sons were doing. But the early stages of Def Leppard were being formed. They weren't called that then. In fact, Joe was not even around at the time. They were Atomic Mass. That band was Rick Savage, Tony Kenning, who played drums, and Pete Doubleday. I remember Tony, not as much Pete. In Sheffield, South Yorkshire, they formed that band Atomic Mass in 1976. So a little bit before that, they were already. So 77 really kind of saw the kickoff to that. But it was back to 76. But Pete Willis joined in 77. So you're starting to really see the early version of Leppard, especially with Sav and Willis there. Of course, Sav is on bass, briefly playing guitar. And he can play a little guitar. He writes all his songs on guitar. I like Sav's. He comes up with some really good songs, pieces of music. He really comes up with, as well as lyrics as well. But a lot of music, he does a good job. He's really good at ballads. I mean, he is. He's just really good at that. I think he was kind of initiated Hysteria, if I remember right. I could have that wrong, but I'm thinking so. My brain forgets more than I ever knew, and so Sav was on bass, briefly played guitar. Kenning obviously on drums. Andy Nicholas was on bass for a while, and Nick Mackley was on lead vocals. So a name that nobody remembers except those in the know and in that era. Nick Mackley was on lead vocals in this band. Other members to come and go were Paul Holland on vocals, Melanie Davis guitars, keyboards, violin, and bass. What about that? Incorporating some violin and keyboards. And they've always had little keyboards, but the violin. Paul Hampshire, lead guitar, and Nick Halt, vocals. 18 at the time, Joe Elliott. Joe Elliott goes on to say in this article or this posting, he tried out for the band as a guitarist, which he was never going to be a lead guitarist, but he can play. He can play piano and guitar, and he writes all his stuff on piano. I think a little bit on guitar. He tried out for the band as a guitarist. Following a chance meeting with Willis, he missed a bus. He talks about this a lot. How he missed a bus, and if he hadn't missed the bus, he wouldn't have run into Pete Willis. And he that really solidified everything. That meeting was amazing. That was in November 1977. During his audition, it was decided that he was better suited to be the lead singer. He had the most albums. He had more albums than anybody. Probably has more albums than anybody in the world today. I'm only joking a little bit. This guy's a big collector of albums, and he's a music historian, very much so. I'll never forget one time Journey was going to be on tour with Leppard. They did it a couple of times. They were on a radio station. I watched the interview, and he knew more about Journey music than Neil Schon, some of it. He was answering questions about it that Neil was not getting right. That's how much of a student of it is. He just has a great love for that. Nothing against Neil Schon, but it just seemed to me that Joe was a bigger fan of the music than Neil was. It was kind of funny. So their first gig was in a dining hall in A Block in Westfield School in Mossborough, Sheffield. And I've heard them talk about that gig. And you remember, if you know the band at all, Elliott came up. He came up with a lot. I mean, the meeting him was very much moved them forward because he had a lot of ideas. He'd been working on these ideas about having a band, and which a lot of young guys were in England at that time. But he was putting things in motion. He wasn't just daydreaming. He was making plans. Like he was going to make it. And I think the other guys had the same plan. They just had to find each other to get there. So the original spelling, you remember, the very early copies. Boy, if you have a copy of that EP early programs and flyers that they made. Def was DEAF, Leopard, Leopard, was all changed to mimic or to look like Led Zeppelin. That kind of cryptic thing and the writing of the way they wrote that was the name that he originally brought. He thought of while designing band posters. So that was just another way that they benefited from meeting Joe in art class. So instead of doing school, it's art, so I guess it counts. Kenning suggested the spelling was slightly modified to make the name seem less like that of a punk band. In January 1978, everything really came together. And I don't think, they may have gigged, they may have done a lot of stuff, but really meeting Steve Clark kicked them in the rear end. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But Steve Clark joined the band. According to Elliott, he successfully auditioned for the band by playing Leonard Skinner's Freebird in its entirety, which I thought is very unique that he chose that cut. I mean, obviously it's something he liked, he played, and you see all these different influences come on. Joe, Mott the Hoople, all of them Queen, all of them AC/DC, but there were different English bands that they liked. Of course, the Beatles influenced everybody, and you see the early music, which is all just so varied. I love it. Doesn't get enough recognition, their first album, or even EP, and those cuts live on, and especially a couple of them. Wow. But they don't get enough credit for what they did early on. But you can see all those influences coming out. And but meeting Steve Clark, who was definitely in the AC/DC, he's Southern rock and different things. I mean, he was a rocker, and so he auditioned and just wow, okay, this guy plays. He can play that all the way through. Well, he's in. And so in November, just prior to recording sessions for a 3-song release known as the Def Leppard EP, I think there was only 5,000 of those, or if that many. I can't remember. I think that's about right. The parents paid for it because they didn't have the money. And so Kenning left the band, and he later formed the band Cairo, or however you say that. It could be different pronunciations, but anyway, nothing against him, and he's kept in touch with the band through the years. He was replaced for those sessions by Frank Noon. That's another name you remember. And by the end of the month, this fills out the band, a very young, only 15 at the time, Rick Allen joins the band. A very fast drummer at the time with 2 arms. Joined the band. He had to get permission slips and stuff to go on tour with him. Joined as the full-time drummer. Sales of the EP soared after the track Get Your Rocks Off was given extensive airtime by BBC Radio. One DJ, John Peel, considered at the time to be a champion of punk rock and new wave music. Now, before we get to there's a little bit of things, all or most of them were working at the Spoon Factory. They gave them chances to practice, and they had they had ability to get a hold of vans and stuff, move equipment around. So they're doing what all bands do. They're working, making some money, pouring it all into the band, and using whatever resources they could get a hold of to get to gigs and make things happen and to have practice areas. So the Spoon Factory definitely plays a big part in the early days of the band. And what really got them going along, but way before the EP, was they had been practicing, which you should. You should practice a lot. But Steve Clark was getting antsy. And he threatened to leave the band, or they thought he was going to leave the band. I don't know if he actually ever made the threat, but what he said was, are we ever going to have a gig? Which is so funny, because Steve Clark was so, like some artists, every artist is nervous, but some it's paralyzing fear. And Steve was the worst one in the band, always was, about fear of getting, but once he was out there, it was fine. But pre-show, he was a wreck sometimes. I mean, and of course he was alcoholic, which got worse throughout the years. And he drank, which a lot of people have done, drugs of different types, from alcohol to other things. A lot of artists have used to try to cover up the fear of going on stage, the stage fright, they call it. Which, when you go to Pyromania, they talk about. Of course, that's double entendre for something else, but it makes sense. It kind of works both ways. A lot of their music, a lot of rock and roll does. And so, but Joe told the rest of the guys, hey, we got to do something. We got to get a gig, or we're going to lose Steve. And nothing against Pete Willis, because I'm going to talk about Pete in a minute. I think he's amazing. I love his playing, bluesy. Came with some great stuff. and but he wasn't. He wasn't threatening to leave. They didn't want to lose Steve. Steve was the riff master. They didn't know it at the time, even, but he was the king of the riffs. He wasn't the most technical player or nothing like that. Wasn't the fastest player. He had a great feel. He played a little bit off. He held his guitar like Jimmy Page. His stage movements changed throughout the career, as well as others worked on theirs. Like Phil Collins, he really worked on his as well. We'll get to him, maybe not tonight, but we'll get to him eventually. And but Steve Clark was coming up with that stuff, and so yeah, here they've got the band. They practiced the crazy, and they finally get the gig. They get the EP out. Now they're getting a little recognized, and so throughout '79, which is this is Leopard was an '80s band. '70s were laying the foundation, getting everything ready for them to break forth. They had a pretty loyal following, although they were never big in England until way later. But they had a loyal local, British hard rock, heavy metal fans, and they were some of the leaders of what's known as the new wave of British heavy metal. I've watched shows on that and documentaries and stuff. And so that growing popularity is what you do, right? You get a record deal, uh, you know, Phonogram, Vertigo, Mercury Records in the U.S., and they signed originally with MSB, a local duo consisting of Pete Martin and Frank Stewart Brown. Were fired after Martin and Joe Elliott got into a fistfight after an incident on the road. The band approached Peter Minch, another huge, huge ladder for them to climb up. That Pete Minch got involved here. I mean, this the Q Prime and all that stuff, and everything later with the Colliders of the world and all that stuff. All this stuff was the ground was being the path was being paved for them, and it was a great move that they approached him of Labor Krebs management, who had booked them on the tour of the UK, supporting, and they had great acts that they supported. This was another benefit for them. And what a band to open up for at that time was AC/DC. They're heroes. Nobody bigger for them than Queen, I would say, as far as a band like that. Um, all the way across the band. Got to open for AC/DC, Bon Scott era. They talked about how gracious Bon was. He would come in and bring them M and M's, and he was a drinker. I'm sure him and Steve boozed it up a little bit, but not that he was hanging out there all the time. But he would come in there and he'd make sure they were okay. That's you don't always get that. I gave him some money. I think he helped them out at times. And I think that's that early. I think two things: the steel mill, hard, gritty kind of, a Pittsburgh kind of town is Sheffield. They're a lot alike. That gritty, you stand together, you work hard, you don't give up, and you help each other. All that was already there. But when you get on the road, it can be dog eat dog. Some bands are just not good bands. They're mean. They're prima donnas. They treat their opening acts like crap, and it's just you get jaded to that. Well, they were with the guys of AC/DC that were treating them all great. They were gracious. They were never brawlers or nothing like that. And they liked to laugh and cut up and have a good time. They played hard. They walked out there, jeans and t-shirts, and just kicked butt. And so they were getting introduced in this early day to people who were massive. By this time, AC/DC is really hitting high gear, fresh off of a very successful album and tour. They've just been touring endlessly. And the fact that they got that, uh, and it says here that Mincho admitted that he had his eyes on the band, became their manager. Like I said, it was a great move. So all of that's happening, and you're just building, and that's what they do. And then in March of 1980, they released this really different kind of album, On Through the Night. It's just an amazing album. And a lot of people, had the guitar on the back of the flatbed, and I like the look of it. I mean, it probably didn't cost them a lot of money to do that. I don't know who, I've not researched who designed that. I probably read it and forgot it. But they had the EP, then in 80, On Through the Night. And this album never, there's the people who are in the know, they get it, and they understand it. But this album does not get all the credit that it deserves. Now, there were some things that weren't fully developed yet for them. They were still working on it. But, the fact that you got a song like Wasted, I mean, Steve brings them this, he said, basically listen to this. And he walks in with Wasted. And Joe, like in, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, puts the lyrics with it. And they've got this song for the album, which was their first release off that album. And it actually released slightly before 80 in November of 79. That song was out there. And it's still, even today, I know in some of the shows, they'll bring back that song. And it gives Viv a chance to really just, kick it. And that was Steve's song, and it was just a kick butt song. And that, again, that plays into that punkish, gritty, heavy metal British, kids and, bunch of guys, and they would love that. It's just a straight on rocker. Definitely has influences of AC/DC and others, and it is what it is. It's not a deep song. It's not meant to be. It's in your face, wasted, and it just has a great riff, and I love every part of it. And I can listen to that song every day. It's just a great song. And then a very different kind of song when they went through the number two, and it caused them a lot of problems. Hello, America. I mean, this goes back to Joe, who a driving force in the band, lyrically, things they did. Joe was always 3 steps out, thinking ahead, probably more than that. But Joe, and not all of them were, but Joe definitely was. This is Joe's got his fingerprints all over it. He's like, America. Who wouldn't? I mean, but he, and so English fans got upset with that. Like, wait a minute, you're English band, you're saying hello, America. And it wasn't meant to be a diss. It just meant we want to go to America. We want to conquer America. We want to, the girls, the money, the beaches and all that stuff. England's a dreary place, rain, So they come from a dusty, grimy town. Nothing against Sheffield. I think Sheffield's a fine town, but it's industry. It's like my town used to be, foundries and steel and all that. And he said, when you were in that town, you either went to work in the mills, and died early, or you got the heck out. He said we chose to get out. It's not because they didn't have a work ethic. They just said, I don't want that. I don't want to die, early. I don't want to die at 45 or 50. I want to live my dreams. I want to get out. I want to do what I want to do. I want to make a living with my way, music. But they were working. They weren't lazy. They weren't sitting around. They weren't flop house, just flopping around. They were working. They understood the work ethic. They just decided they wanted to be something else. They had a dream. And Hello America, which is, it's a little bit different kind of a song. It's very different than just about anything they've ever done, but it's a good song. And then Rock Brigade, which is a great song, has been reinvented, reproduced many times. It's the name of their fan club. I love the Rock Brigade. I love that. It's a kicker. I like that. But those were the singles off of it, and it really, like I said, it really paved the way for a lot of things later. So that you had Rock Brigade first, and again going back to those albums, which I love to talk albums. The Rock Brigade leads off on the first side of that album, the Rock Brigade, followed by Hello America. Sorrow's a Woman, another, dreamy kind of, Joe's working out his lyrics and really, working out this, but it's a very different kind of song. They take a journey with this album. It's the songs are very different across the board. And so you had Rock Brigade, Steve Clark, Joe Elliott, and Rick Savage get credit for that song, which is a very common thing. Hello America, Clark Elliott Savage. Sorrow's a Woman, Clark Elliott Savage Willis. He's making his presence known in this one. It Could Be You, Elliott Willis. Satellite, Clark Elliott Savage Willis. And When the Walls Come Down, another one of my favorites from the album. Nothing against the other songs, just one of my favorites. Clark Elliott and Andrew Smith, they had worked with. Wasted starts off side 2. Of course, Clark Elliott. He brought the music. Of course, Joe put the lyrics. Rocks Off, another great song. Clark Elliott Savage Willis. It Don't Matter, Clark Elliott Willis. Answer to the Master, and then Clark Elliott Savage Willis. And then the last song, a longer song, 7 minutes, 44 seconds, Overture, Clark Elliott Savage Willis. And so you have those musicians. They also had Chris Hughes play synthesizer on Hello America. Dave Cousins was the voice on When the Walls Come Tumbling Down. And then they give out some of the people there. So here you have this album. People don't know quite what to do with it. A lot of people loved it. they're looking like this is like they can hear the influences in it. They can hear the AC/DC. They can hear some of the British influences, some of the American influences. It all comes out, and you can see the possibilities. And you definitely could see it. And people that were very smart, like Mutt Lange, got started noticing this band as well. And of course, through their management team, the Q Crime, the Minch and manager, they had the blessing of getting, uh, you know, really, and they toured like crazy. They toured like crazy. That's not the subject to not talk about all the tours, but I definitely want to get into High and Dry while I have time in this hour. It was not. I mean, their influences: Thin Lizzy, Mott the Hoople, um, Queen. I mean, that you could hear a lot of that in there, and these are bands they loved, and so you're influenced, and it comes out in your music, your writing, and everything you do, even the look. I would say this, later on they toured with Ozzy, and those are legendary too as well. And just going a little forward, and this come out of Rudy Sarzo's book Off the Rails about Randy Rhoads, and there's a couple of bits in there about Def Leppard because they were touring together at the time, and a lot of people give Phil a hard time. Now he plays very different than Willis. Obviously, some people like Willis more, but Phil has done amazing stuff with the band, and I'd say he's a fun guy to be around. Of course, huge friends with Steve Clark at the time. And really was a studio hound. Loved to be in the studio where some of the others didn't as much. They just couldn't handle that. He eats it up. He eats it like candy. But if you've read that book, you know that Rudy Sarzo was walking by. Randy Rhoads was walking by Sarzo with him, and he stops and he sees Phil doing moves with his guitar in front of the mirror. He's working out his own stage presence of what, and he said that guy's going to do great things. That's from Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads said this guy, because he's working. He's not. He's just. I mean, sure they drank, sure they partied, the girls and all that, but they took the time to always work the craft, to have good songs, good great music, and giving people some things they wanted. They always made sure that came first. They wanted quality, they wanted good sound, all that stuff. And not them, just them only. I think that's any band that really goes to the top. You're thinking of everything, and I think all the way back you can see that. So, it's Clark Willis was a powerhouse on guitar. The live one that they released from an early show that sort of lost and found, and that came out a couple 3 years ago, whenever it was, a part of a box set too, I think, where they're playing the early stuff. It's not the greatest video, but it's not bad, and you can see just the dynamic of what that band was already in the early '80s, way before the superstardom, and the fact, and that's why I think that this album does not get the credit, because if it's not for On Through the Night, they never get to High and Dry. Never. It just doesn't happen. And you got to give credit for that. Was it a finished product? No. Could they have done better with it in places? Sure, they would tell you that. But man, if you go back and listen to it, you could just, because where they went, you can kind of see all that in the different styles and everything. And they're trying to figure out what is the Def Leppard sound. Now, this is a controversial point. A lot of people after High and Dry left the band. I mean, they said, no, I wanted them to be this. They were being called the next AC/DC, which is ridiculous, or other bands like that. There's always that argument that a band stay just like they are. They were never going to do that. Never. It was not their intention ever to be that. They weren't running from anything. They were going towards something. And people that labeled them at that time, that's what they wanted to be. They missed the mark. You can listen to them, you can enjoy it. If you don't listen to the rest, that's fine. But the whole what if game, that was never going to happen. They always were looking at these bands that were around for a long time, and they kind of reinvented themselves. Look at the Rolling Stones. They do. And they noticed that the Rolling Stones had, although a lot of the same, that blues and everything in their music as well, soulful, and big and Motown and all that stuff. But they also reinvented themselves. Their sound took journeys on albums and stuff, and still to this day, I mean, what an amazing career. Most of them are still there. There's been a couple die, But they look at them. They looked at a queen who continues to move forward after tragedy struck them. They look at these bands that are still around and still doing it, after 40, 50 years. Some of them around 60 years, and they're like, we want to be like that. We want to be around a long time. Well, you just can't stay exactly the same. You've got to continue to let your talent shine through, and let the music take you, and get that sound. And they took gambles. It's another thing you have to do sometimes. You got to be willing to take a gamble, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I was reading a spot tonight of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, a little story, and legendary. And what the article was talking about how, and they said we made some bad albums. They should be burned. Some other people might like them, but they said those were bad albums. Sometimes you miss it. Maybe you miss it with part of the album, a few songs. It does for Leopard. It's probably X. Honestly, some might say another album, but they've kind of gotten back. I mean, I think that they've really kicked with the last 2 or 3 releases, a couple of releases for sure. They're working on new music, and I think that was amazing what they came back to. It was really like back, to the original, as far as around the Pyromania time, Hysteria. They definitely parked within there. That's their sound. That's who they are. They'll take experiments, and for the people that think Vivian Campbell's all of a sudden break into some lead like out in Dio, that's not going to happen there. It's just not who they are. Uh, and he has that side project, and he feeds that part of him, the last in line. But he's had I mean, he's been in Leopard longer than Steve Clark was ever there. Think about that. And they honor the Steve Clark memory. Viv has no problem with that. He's not have an ego about it. He plays those parts. He tries to remain true to them as he can. Although on Gods of War, he will say, "I messed that song up in one part just about every time I play it." For some reason, it's a block for him. He just can't get there. Steve Clark, he got me on that one. But and as good as Vivian is, he said some shows I get it, some shows I don't. That happens for a lot of artists, especially when you're playing somebody else's stuff, or even your own that you laid down hadn't forgot. I was listening to the interview with Jakey Lee, for the Aussie tribute, and the 2 songs they chose, and he said I forgot how hard the solo was in one of the songs, and I forget which one it was, and he said I worked on it. And I called the guy up over the thing, and he said, I just don't know if this is going to work. He said, some days I nail it, some days I miss it. And he said, it was frustrating. He said, hey, no worries. We got Nuno here. He said, yo, great. So he talks to Nuno and says, hey, will you double up with me, and, on this song? And he says, I'll do everything but the solo. I'm not taking your solo. But it worked out. But it made him confident to have Nuno on stage for that one song anyway. What a great guy, Nuno, man. That tour coming up with Motley Crue, whether you like Extreme or not, Nuno, wow. And I like Extreme. I don't like everything they did, but I like a lot of it. It's different. And Tesla, what a great bill for the summer. And I know Motley's had some problems, but I think Vince is doing better, and John Favre is always, just bad dude, man. He slays it. That's a great summer tour. Be expensive stadium prices too, but I would go. I had the money. I don't have the money. But so you have this the dynamic here already in place, and you get you've laid your groundwork. You had the EP, it done well. You got on the radio, which is amazing in and of itself. Can you imagine how many EPs, one song demos, all this stuff that all the DJs are getting? The fact that they already had that, and then they solidified it with On Through the Night. Sorry, I got allergies. Leads into High and Dry. What a kick butt album. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan. I never have been of the album cover. It's kind of weird to me. Some others might disagree. I don't hate it. I just never liked it that much. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of looking back, I think they probably don't care for it as much either. And they got him with Satari or whatever you say his name, and he did all the artwork for most of their stuff going forward. But it's unique, and it stands on its own. But it doesn't matter the cover. what's inside that album rocked, and it still rocks. Some of my favorite Leopard songs, and some will say this album. Whereas on through the night, I can listen to the whole album, but obviously there's some in there that they needed to develop a little more, and they said that they needed a little bit more. It's we kind of we it's a little fluff there. You could say that there's no fluff in High and Dry, none. You can put that album on and rock it front to back, inward out, back to forward, forward to back. It doesn't matter. This album is loaded, and fans love it, and that's why that always at least two songs from this album make any show they do. You got a lot of songs; it's hard to get them all, but of course, "Bringing on the Heartbreak" is always there. Which, by the way, I love the way they introed that in the Hysteria tour. It was great. If you watch the video version of that, that's amazing. I think that was from Denver, parts of it anyway. I love the little acoustic guitar work that Phil's doing. I love the Razor, the double guitar there that Steve's got. That's a great moment. I could watch, brings tears to my eyes as I think about Steve, and he just looked so happy there. He looked great. He's playing great, and it's a little comedy there, and they got the fans into it, and it was a different way of listening to that song. And then they when they punch it in and just kick it till the end. That's I was the first tour that I got to watch them. I had their albums. I never got to see the tour. 1987 was the first time of many times that I saw them, and just hearing how they did that was awesome. So this is also Clark Willis all the way. Willis has got his stamp all over this. He is and definitely should have been in the Hall of Fame with them, and he decided not to go. He's a hard guy to really even find out what he's doing. He's in property management, and he says getting kicked out probably saved his life because he was a full fledged alcoholic, and he was as Joe said, an angry drunk. He was a really short guy, and I'll just say here, Joe, the English humor is a little different. But sometimes I'll just say, and it's not a shot at Joe. Everybody, it's just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I don't like the interviews where he really makes fun of Pete. I just don't care for that part. I'm sure it's the English humor side. I get it, but at the same point, this guy and he gives him credit. Now he does. He plays both sides of that street. And I saw a recent interview where he did. He said the great, Pete Willis, and they try to keep his not as much as Steve's, but he kind of comical around that about the whole firing and everything. And I realized Pete was putting them through heck. They were all drinking heavily. It's just Pete couldn't handle it like the others go. Not that they were great, but he was bombing out in front of Mutt Lang, and when the Pyromania recording was going on, which we're not going to get there tonight, but. High and Dry it's great. The guitar work, you could see they were working out things on the stage, but and we could go there and talk about how what Leopard started doing, especially on the High and Dry. You could see that in the videos, and the live cuts, and was solidified in Pyromania. They were not a band that stood in their spots. They were moving. That took a lot of energy, culminating. I mean, the biggest runs was in the Round in Your Face. I mean, running all over the stage, but they were already doing that before they went in the round. They were, changing sides, backward, forward. They were in motion. A lot of bands, they would just stand in the same spot. They were playing killer music, but they didn't move around much. In fact, some bands, it's like you stay in your spot, I'll stay in mine. I remember Rudy Sarzo in his book. He got in trouble with Sharon and Ozzy when he played with them because Rudy is a very, he moves a lot. He's slinging that bass around and everything. Well, he made the mistake of getting out ahead of Ozzy. And so he got dressed down for that. They gave him a box. They said, "That's your box. You're not the star here. Who do you think you are? You were out in front of Ozzy." He has no ego. He wasn't looking at it that way, but boy, they did. You get that kind of stuff. They weren't like that. It was like it's all about the show. It's all about the, Joe's a natural leader, but it's a band that is a band. I mean, they split, all this stuff. They try to give, credit where credit's due. Obviously, some of them get on the songwriting, but and even Rick Allen has gotten on some songs. They've made sure that everybody has, some royalties there, and as part of that music publishing part, which is so important. And Joe is a driving force, but he doesn't dictate. He's not a dictator. He's not telling the other guys, "You'll do this or else." That's why they stayed around so long. Those kind of bands break up. People leave. They can't handle that. I mean, who can? You might put up with it for a while, but after a while, you're going to get sick of that. You're going to say, I'm done here." And so you have this another great tour. Uh, you know, they came out with "Let It Go" was the first single, and they only released the two, "Let It Go" and "Bring On the Heartbreak." And I'll still remember the early days of MTV, and they really also benefited them and many other bands that MTV Music Video Channel came along at that time, because if you weren't heard on radio, you were seen on MTV, which drove the radio. And they were young, they were good-looking young English dudes. Joe hasn't dyed his hair yet; he's got the dark hair, but they can, they can see already. These guys are energetic, they're in shape, they're moving around, they're young. They got the definition of a hair band. They all had long hair, you know, and great sound, big sound. And so, they worked with the great. The producer was Mutt Lange, Robert John Mutt Lange. We're going to do a show just about him. I mean, amazing guy. This and he is officially. I mean, they always say in their books and everything, he is the unofficial, but yeah, he's the sixth member of the band. And even though he doesn't work with them really anymore, they still bounce ideas here and there off of him from time to time. But his influence is all over this band. And some would say to the detriment. Now, the hardcore folks after High and Dry say, they sold out in Pyromania, and the slickness, the commercial, it wasn't as gritty and all that. But High and Dry had this live feel. I mean, it's one of those songs you could just, or one of those albums, they could just, go live. I mean, it'd be even probably bigger if they'd just done it, recorded that album live, because it plays itself to be alive. It's only 42 minutes long, which was quite a long time. I mean, back in the days of albums, you could only go about close to 60, but 42 minutes, a little over 42 minutes. Recorded at Battery Studios in London, and that was recorded between March and June of 1981. Released July 6th, 1981. Boy, things changed for them then. It's not that it wasn't the biggest selling album for them, but it done very well, and it also just kicked their set them in America. I mean, what Hello America went on through the night, what that really was speaking of came to fruition with High and Dry in America. They came and they saw and they conquered, and they were going to conquer even more on the next album, which we won't get to tonight. As we look at this overview, then we'll go back and dive into tours and talk about each member and stuff as we go. But this working with Mutt really paved the way for Pyromania. Obviously, he saw in them a band that was coachable. At this time the drinking hadn't got as bad. Maybe, Pete Willis just couldn't record in Pyro. He laid down some tracks, but the leads and stuff, he just was a mess. And so the reception was was good. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was very good. And again, you're moving forward. You're moving forward. You're getting better. And this was an album that they could go out and be confident with. They had arrived. They were every band's in awe when you first get out there. You're new. You're figuring your way out. You're with these heroes. I mean, of theirs, opening up for them, and just living the life of a young person. No money, but you're getting things thrown at you left and right. So let's go through the album really quick. And the songs "Let It Go," Pete Willis, Steve Clark, and Joe Elliott are given credit for this. And all the songs on here are a little bit longer too. So another norm that they broke is a lot of even rock songs were, a little over 3 minutes to even a little under 3 minutes. A lot of songs. Leopard went longer. They tended to go 4 and 5 minutes, sometimes 6 and 7. They did it on the first album. They continued it here. Didn't have the 7 minute plus, but they did that later as well. They also had some B sides here that had some nice, uh, when we eventually heard those, Me and My Wine. I like that one. It was a B side. A lot of their B side stuff was really good. Tear It Down was a B side at one point. I said at the time they got to release this as a single. Of course, they didn't do it until Adrenalize, but I like that song. I always liked it. That's another one. It kind of harkened back to High and Dry, honestly, and I think it had elements of being around all the way back to them. Another hit and run, great live. And if you watch the Sheffield show where they didn't make any money, but they recorded that with Viv in the band. Oh, they just slay it at that show. Oh my gosh! And this song, just really cool. They kind of had some parts in it they added in, and they're trading off the guitars on the leads and stuff. I love to watch that video just for that interplay on Another Hit and Run. Packed out stadium, Don Valley, and oh, I love that. High and Dry Saturday Night. Rick Savage and Elliott on Another Hit and Run. High and Dry Saturday Night. Clark, Savage, Elliott, Willis, and we got solos here. I won't mention all those. And then Bringing on the Heartbreak definitely was big. MTV, huge. Another thing they did, they went back, and all of us they went back and re-recorded when Phil got in the band with it, and then later on they even re-recorded all their stuff anyway to kind of set. They were getting ripped off on some stuff. That's always important to do. But a lot of bands have had to do that. But when Phil showed up, they re-recorded some of this and did videos with him and stuff. Then Switch 625, which is in every show, or at least most of them. Maybe some of the small club shows they've done, maybe it's not there. But I love the guitar exchange between them. It's always a great build-up. And when you get to the end of Bring on the Heartbreak, it's just that on the radio they don't include that. I wish they did. And I know that would be 7:37 of song, but they should just do that. Whenever they play Bring on the Heartbreak on the radio, they should always go to Switch 625, and it just fits. It's made. It was a perfect segue into that. Ends the first side. You Got Me Running. Willis Clark Elliott. Man, I love that song. Lady Strange. A little bit different kind of a song on this one. Still rocker, but they switched it up a little bit on this song. Even Rick Allen gets in on this one as credit for writing. Then going back to the previous album, On Through the Night, which is kind of a little bit of a trend they did there for a while. On Through the Night, Clark, Savage, Elliott. Mirror, Mirror, Look Into My Eyes. Well, that was a different one. Clark, Elliott, and No, 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 Savage, Willis, Elliott. And they did some reissue and bonus tracks, was Bring It On the Heartbreak remix, and then Me and My Wine again, as we said. So this was an album where they brought Mike Shipley, who has been prominent throughout their recording career, Nigel Green, all these guys with Mutt Lange. They had a powerhouse, and they've worked with a lot of these guys for decades. And again, it was just very important. 2 million it has hit in America, which is amazing. So it was 100,000 in Canada, which is a platinum there for them. It was a huge hit. So that's what you do. You hit it. You go on tour. You tour like crazy. You got your ideas on the tour. You go back in the recording studio. We'll get to that next week as far as Pyromania and the stuff that happened leading up. To Pyromania, there were some things that happened, and then during the recording of course, Pete Willis, and all of that. That's and just a lot of things around that album. Here they are. They're poised. They're poised. Some things happened they had to overcome, and they could feel it. They could sense it. They knew where they were at. They knew what they had, and they knew that the next album was going to be big. Did they know it was going to be that big? I don't know, but that was some young men who were confident when they went in the studio, and they believed they had full confidence in Mutt Lange. Full confidence. They had full confidence in their ability to deliver the goods, and all of that created a legendary album. And I will talk about that a little bit personally. Because the story really picks up strong for me at that point with the Pyromania album. and I'll tell a little story about that, which is very personal to me next week. So you got to come back. I try to do these shows on. I tried to do this one on Tuesday night, but it'll bounce between Tuesday or Thursday. If you follow us on Band, the app BAND, and just look for the Southern Fried Podcast, you'll see our schedule, and I update that every day. If we have to move something, cancel something, rearrange it, whatever. But it's going to be either Tuesdays or Thursdays, and so it may just rest right here on Thursday night. I kind of like this night leading into the weekend. It's a great time to talk music. But we're going to have special guests and things along the way. This is one of my favorites. I saw Def Leppard 15 times over the course of me going to seeing them. 4 on the original going out with Hysteria. Then they kind of they obviously pour some sugar on me and all that, and I went back and ended up seeing them between Hysteria and Adrenalize 15 times, and wished I'd seen them more. Honestly, it was great, and it was I'll get to it in a week or so. That first concert with them, wow, it's electric. I can't even imagine. It's really hard to put into words. My wife was there. I'm gonna tell you, she became a fan instantaneously. She loves Leopard. My sons, they love the band. They've got a lot of musical taste. My son sends me clips all the time of Animal or Hysteria, pour some sugar. I mean, he sends me stuff all the time like that. He loves the band. My sisters love the band. I took them to see them when they were very young, and they never forget that. And they, like I said, they were young, and for the girls, they were good looking. For the guys, they had that. It was good to watch Def Leppard if you had a girl. You take her to the Def Leppard show, she's happy, and good music to play in the car. Take out maybe the heavier Black Sabbath, record to the girl, put in a little Def Leppard, and things might go a little bit your way. I remember Joe. Let's say this. I'm about to get off here. I remember Joe saying, in England, the accent don't matter. I mean, it's like, he's just another English bloke. But he said, them Texas girls sure, they said, oh, I like that accent you have. He said, those Texas girls just really loved on him. You know what I mean. Controversy, though. They are a band that have had some controversy. We'll touch on it as we go. It hurt them at times. In one big way. They've overcame it. But it was a firestorm for them. And it was right at the peak. Right at their peak. And again, I don't even want to say English humor on this one because it just was comments that shouldn't have been made. And maybe they got taken out of context, maybe not. I don't know. But we'll talk about the controversy on the album and all that stuff, the adrenal hysteria, I mean. And we'll continue on. Def Leppard, what a great band. Just got the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It was a big thrill for them. They held a picture of, Steve there, and they mentioned Pete Willis. It was a thrill for Viv. I mean, wow, what a career he's had. And I saw something with him. I'll say this before we get out there. I'm a big fan of Vivian Campbell. I was so excited when I knew he was in the running, and I was so glad that he got it because it's hard to replace. Tremendously hard. And some say they haven't. And you don't really replace. Did Viv replace Steve? No, Viv is Viv. When Steve died, Steve took a lot with him that they never really recovered from. But what we have is really good. And Viv is, he's happy. But I remember, his first, they did a little club gig show. But, they did the Freddie Mercury tribute. And here they are. I mean, all the people there. All the people watching around the world, about millions by way of satellite, all the people there all day, all these bands, and they get the chance to come out and play a couple of songs and play with, the Queen guys and do one of their songs as well. But that was Viv's breaking out. We'll talk about that. But comments that he said, I just want to say this before we'll get to that down the road. But he meets rock royalty there. And he's thinking to himself, hey, I could get used to this. This feels good. And he was probably a little nervous as he stepped out there in his red jacket and everything with that long hair before the cancer messed with him. And he looked great in the band. Played different. He can't be Steve. You got to be Viv. And it's an amazing career. So we'll continue to talk about it. I love music, and I'm not a musician though. I do pick a little bit, but I'm not a musician. So I'm a true fan, but I know what I like. I know the sounds. I'm not a player who studies playing, if that makes sense. I watch the guitars, instructionals. I listen to the artists talk about the way a riff was developed for them, or a song, or a bridge, or whatever. I'm a student of it. I just like that. I don't know everything. That's not the intention here. I'm not going to sit here and talk about and a musician is not going to get anything from me, but maybe as a fan you will. As a musicians are fan as well. They're fans. And I think all of us, that we have that fan part of us, that we know what we like. It's what made us go down to the record store, for those of us old enough to do that, and put the money together. And how we got that money, it was only, $10 or something like that in those days, but getting the money to get there and sometimes we bought albums just based on the album cover, just what it looked like. So we'll talk about all that. Thanks for stopping by. It was a late show, but it's okay. Dave Late Night, the Cornbread Man. Thanks for supporting the Southern Fried. Wolf Nation is another new entity coming along. We're talking about a lot of things. There's a lot of good things going on with the podcast, and we hope you enjoy what we do. We do a lot of different kinds of stuff because we like stuff, and we just want to do it. It's fun for us. We hope it is for you. I play something getting out of here. And, hey, my boy gets a kick out of this song. Just how big a boy are you? So we'll play a little something hard, a little bit harder, a little aggressive, not speed metal, but just aggressive. Take care.
Dirt on your hands, fight in your eyes, scars on your plans. Who you gonna be when the lights all fade? When the stage is gone, when the debts ain't paid. Just how big a boy are you when the chips fall, when the fish fly? Just how big a boy are you when the truth comes, when the lies die? Big talk ain't the weight you carry. Broke down truck in a no-name town, dust on your tongue, rain won't come down. What's the measure of a man with nothing to show? When the wind cuts deep, when the seeds don't grow. Just how big a boy are you when the walls crack, when the earth shakes? How big a boy are you when your pride bends, when your heart breaks? Big talk don't mean a thing at all. You can puff your chest, you can raise your chin, but the mirror don't care about the fire within. How far will you go? How much will you lose when it's blood for blood and you gotta choose? Just how big a boy are you when the tide turns, when the